Hi Bella. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to do the video presentation rather than an essay. Um, so the campaign that I chose to investigate is called Bring Change to Mind. So it's a new campaign to me. I had never heard of it about it before. I think it's bigger in the States. So how I found it was I was just sort of looking on YouTube for PSAs regarding the topic of relieving stigma associated with mental illness. And I watched several different videos actually, and this one really stood out to me because their videos were real people telling their own stories with real emotion and no sort of perfection around how the videos looked. So I liked that it was more of a storytelling aspect to it. So and also they're like just short clips, so all the PSAs and sort of videos that were linked to this campaign were all just like either 30 seconds or 3 minutes. So it really captures their audience attention, but also has a really good message behind them. So that's sort of why I picked it. So who's involved in this campaign is the award-winning actress Glenn Close. So I had to kind of look up who she was because I recognized the name, but I didn't really know where I knew it from. So being a 90s baby, I know her from 101 Dalmatians, but obviously she's been in a lot of other things. So she actually started this campaign because someone in her family had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And around that time, they had been experiencing a lot of even self-stigmatization and also realizing that there's a lot of stigma and discrimination associated with that label. So they wanted to take action and sort of relieve some of that stigma, and they did that in the form of this campaign. So it's the Close family that sort of got this campaign up and running, but they're not the only spokespeople. I would say that all of their anyone who's involved in their videos are spokespeople for them, because once someone opens up to you like that, their faces are really recognizable. And I noticed that because of that, they used a lot of the same people in different PSAs because their stories were so touching. So I would say their audience, well, even on their website, it sort of says that their their main audience is high school, university, and college age students. I think typically their reasoning behind that was because a lot of the time discrimination happens in school, and that's where it's more like sort of noticeable. And a lot of kids struggle with just discrimination around having a mental illness or suicidal thoughts associated with it. And so they've seen that and seen the need for a campaign for young people. So their primary audience is young people, but it also reaches out to older as well, because their stories are so touching. But I'd say it's geared mostly towards like a age bracket of say 12 to 30. The reason I'm saying that age bracket is I feel that they're typically the ones who use a lot of forms of social media. So they have tons of different forms of social media associated with this campaign, which I'll get to in a minute. Excuse me. So what they hope to achieve, their sort of mission statement on their website says, working to end stigma and discrimination of mental illness. So that's what they're hoping to achieve, and they're doing that by sort of normalizing mental illnesses and allowing people to feel not ashamed by having one. So all their videos on the Bring Change to Mind website are sort of informing people that they're not alone. And it talks about all the stats behind mental illnesses and how it's better to express those feelings associated rather than going down the dark path of sort of internalizing it. So it's also talks about stereotypical judgments and certain myths associated with mental illness. So there's this one link that I kind of liked on their website. It just talks about a couple different biases and myths people tend to have around the topic of mental illness, and then it actually informs readers like the actual facts around those myths. So yeah, it talks about a lot about the specific disorders as well. So if you go onto the website, it talks about bipolar disorder, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, and they all, and a couple other ones, but they all have like the symptoms, how it can be managed, and a bunch of different information, so that, you know, if readers don't exactly know, then that information is there for them as well. So that kind of falls under the context as well. So some strengths that I noticed. So while I was researching all the campaigns, I found that a lot of them sort of push their audience to donate, which I did not like. That was not the case for this campaign. But yeah, when I went on to certain websites associated with anti-stigma, they all had like donate here and frequently asked questions were all, how do I donate, and this and that. And it was all around getting people's money, which I did not like. This campaign was more personalized. So the stories like really made you feel like you wanted to help these people, and you could relate to their stories, really. So I liked that because it was really personal. Excuse me. It talked about what exactly stigma is. It talks about what it feels like, and how to change those attitudes. And like I said, there's tons of information around the disorders. It's all real stories. And you can tell they're genuine stories of these young people who have been affected by stigma and discrimination. So real emotion, real stories, those were all huge strengths for me. Areas for improvement, I had never heard of this campaign. I don't know if it's just like big in the States, but it's not something that I had necessarily heard of. But then when I went and actually like looked at their Instagram page and their Twitter page and their Tumblr, like they do have tons of pages. I just, for some reason, had not heard of it myself. I'm guessing that's because they're based out of California. But they do have lots of events elsewhere. I was looking at their events page, and you can actually book your own event, and they have them, excuse me, they hold them at high schools and universities, and to raise awareness, and I thought that was good. But yeah, kind of an improvement would be to widen that range to Canada and further and beyond. So that was one of the improvements that I thought about. Another improvement was like this campaign is really good because they do have tons of forms of social media. They have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vine, Google+, LinkedIn, YouTube, Tumblr, and Snapchat. That's all great, but if you don't have access to the internet or to a mobile phone, then you're not knowing this campaign is in existence. From what I'm aware, they don't really do any sort of advertising outside of those social media. So that was kind of a downfall, because a lot of the time, people who are feeling stigmatized don't have access to these things. So it doesn't reach to them. That was an area of improvement for me. So based on the pool text, I determined that, excuse me, so the anti-oppressive practice talks about depathologizing, and sort of means not letting the diagnosis define you, which this website talks a lot about. One of their PSAs is actually it's called the Grand Central Terminal. It was a PSA that they brought out in 2009. I'm like pretty positive I had seen it before, so I don't know if it was aired on television, but it shows it's actually the family that funded this, or that founded the Bring Change to Mind campaign. It's a bunch of different people. They're all walking around with schizophrenia, bipolar, depression. They have white t-shirts on with that label there. And it's a busy area, obviously. It's Grand Central Terminal. So at first, when I was kind of watching the video, I thought that it was kind of weird, because that is almost defining them, having that label right there on their shirt. But then as I watched the rest of it, the colors fade into like regular colored t-shirts, and they blend in with everyone else. And the people only say a couple different lines, but I thought the PSA was pretty effective. So that one was just a short one that talks about not letting labels define you, sort of. Its message, anyways. So yeah, the Pool article also talked about examining the piece within. So looking at personal biases, stereotypes, stigmatizations that you hold, and reconsidering them and recognizing where they come from. So this website, excuse me, this website talks a lot about that when under its like what is stigma sort of tab there. So it talks about, where that stigma comes from and how you can change those attitudes that you personally hold. The Pool article also mentions focusing on stigma is important, but also targeting the presence and impact of sanism as well. So this campaign doesn't necessarily use the word sanism, but it does talk about certain myths associated with it. So under the fact versus fiction link on their website, it has a lot of information regarding, facts and myths. So I related that to the Pool article there. Sorry, yeah, so that sort of covers empowerment and social justice was also talked about in Pool. I would say this whole campaign is empowering because for me anyways, it was really easy to relate to. So that was kind of empowering and social justice right in the making. Another quote here from Poole, through its concern with the use and abuses of power, anti-oppressive practice is a space-making and change-creating initiative. So I pulled that from the text because I kind of liked how that was worded. So this whole campaign really is about change creating. So their sort of goals and what they're trying to achieve is normalizing the talk around mental illness and making youth realize that it's okay to discuss this topic, and it's encouraged. And then so that was what I had for the Poole text. From the Paradigms book, the three examples that I had relating to this campaign were Paradigm 6, improved knowledge about mental illness will eradicate stigma. So in that paradigm, obviously, it sort of breaks that myth. But for me, personally, a lot of the information on this campaign was really helpful, and I did actually learn a couple new things outside of what I had already known, which sort of showed to be effective for me, because I had written this down, one of the sort of tips, I think they called it, was not to say like headlines and news articles typically say like schizophrenic man or whatever commits this or whatever, but using schizophrenic to actually label someone really fully identifies and defines that individual. And I know that's something we had already talked about in class with labels, but for me, with that fact and sort of like more phrasing it, living with schizophrenia rather than saying schizophrenic man, excuse me, is something that I hadn't, I had considered it, but until now I hadn't realized how detrimental that sounds. So for me, the certain improved knowledge aspect to this campaign did actually work for me, even if it was just that little tip that got me thinking. The next paradigm that I sort of related this campaign to is the anti-stigma campaign's work, which is Paradigm 9, which obviously the text talks about how this isn't necessarily true. This campaign, I think, would really work for a lot of teens, because I found when I was younger, I really needed to see someone else going through something in order for me to feel it's okay to admit that I am going through that as well. So I would say that seeing someone else go through these things in this in the form of these PSAs and short video clips really will change the mind of younger people, anyways, around stigmatizing and internalizing certain things. So I would say it's effective in that way. And another way that I would say that this campaign is very effective is social media is huge in this age bracket. And this campaign reaches out to tons of different forms of social media. And I think it's great because I don't really know how the whole Twitter and Tumblr and those things work, but the hashtag bring change to mind and hashtag mind your future are used, and I guess not too sure how it works, but they all, anyone who's ever hashtagged that can then go to that specific hashtag and view any videos that have been associated with that. So kind of interesting there, because that opens up to a huge population and gets people talking about the same sort of same people going through the same things. So it creates a huge discussion around the world, really. And the next paradigm that I was going to relate this campaign to is paradigm 11, stigma can't be beaten. So that one's a big one. I chose that one because I feel like we've made a huge progress in the past several years anyways. When I was younger, I excuse me, I didn't necessarily pay attention to campaigns such as this one, but I think that's typically because they weren't as popular or as important as they are now. So I think we're making progress. I think the topic is being talked about more. People are finding it's okay to talk about it. So yeah, I thought that anti-stigma campaigns can't be beaten was kind of an interesting paradigm to talk about, because there are people going on to these social medias and creating videos, putting their time and effort into trying to make a change. And they're young people doing it. I know there's older people doing it as well, or old, young, whatever. But I'm really finding that it has been a change. It's moving in the right direction anyways. So how will this campaign assist me in my personal and professional life? Well, this campaign sort of got me thinking a bit more about how many people are actually affected by stigma, and it sort of got me thinking that you never know what someone's going through, so you have to like learning about trauma-informed care was really relevant to this, because you don't know what people have been through, so you automatically have to assume that they've been through everything and back again. So that I will relate to both my professional and personal life. I've always been a very like empathetic person, and I can easily relate to pretty much anyone. I've found that even if I've never experienced anything similar to what someone's going through, and they're expressing this with me, I can almost always be able to relate somehow. In some way, I can empathize for that person. So this campaign really helped me that way, because their PSAs were really effective. There's one actually that I didn't mention. I don't know if it was aired on television. It seems like it might have been. I think it was done in 2013. and it's called Schizo. So it shows like it's kind of like a scary beginning, and it says like schizo, and it looks as if it's going to be like a trailer for a movie, which I kind of thought was effective because people think of schizophrenia and unfortunately automatically they think of like, wow, like it's a scary mental illness, right? So this PSA, I think it's like only a minute long or whatever. It was an effective one because it talks about how people typically associate schizophrenia with being very scary, and then it talks about how it's not, and it's actually quite manageable. So that PSA was really effective, and excuse me, I was able to relate that to my own like personal biases, because schizophrenia isn't necessarily a disorder that I know a ton about, but through this campaign I was actually able to learn a bit more about it and realize my own personal stereotypes and biases. So that helped me a lot. Practical information that I learned was also in that in their information section, because like I said, they had tons of information not only regarding stigma but certain disorders and events and resources, and yeah, actually they had tons of links to resources, and they had all over their webpage it said like the crisis hotline, which I thought was good too, because it kind of, anyone viewing the website may not know about that, right? So having that sort of in a couple different spots was helpful, because you might not necessarily be searching for it, but to see it there might be a good consideration for some people. So did the campaign achieve the desired outcome and reach its target audience? I feel like it did because of all their forms of social media that I talked about earlier. Maybe not necessarily in this area. It might be more well known in the States, but I think in order to reach the whole target audience, it needs to be talked about more. But their YouTube channel is really good. There's tons of different people posting stuff all the time. I watched a bunch of different videos, and they were all they all seemed to be reaching their audience because they all had tons of views and comments and stuff. Yeah, so I guess lastly I'll just talk about like why I liked it. I think, well, I already kind of talked about it, but the reason I really liked this campaign was because it was real, and the people, they sort of allowed almost anyone to post videos on their website, or to post videos and then use the hashtag in order to link it sort of to that website. So I liked it because it's easy to for anyone to join. So rather than, having to sign up or become a member or be part of the organization or whatever, like anyone can try and make a change. So like even a video like this, like someone could just post this video onto YouTube and then link it to that website. And I liked that because a lot of the time people don't want to commit to things. So it just made it easy, right? So yeah, that's why I chose this campaign, because it was real and sort of a storytelling aspect to it. Okay, thanks, Bella. Bye.